once you go IPD, you never want to do anything else ever again. And I feel the same way. Or once you go
We need to
high
talk
intensity,
more.
right? Once you go high intensity lean, and my first lean experience was on a hard bid job. But I just want to start off by asking you, thank you both for following my content. And I will say, the two of you being on the show, it was actually requested by fans of the EBFC show. I've got, yes, multiple people reached out to me and said, you've got to get Kelly and Melissa on the show. And so for all the fans watching the show, you ask and you receive. So this is for you. And fans, yeah, while they're looking, and you guys give me some feedback on that, if you like these guests and you ask for this, make sure you tap that like button, because we're not going to make content like this unless you engage and exercise your fingers. Give us a comment as well. Go ahead, Kelly, you were saying?
Oh, I just humbled and flattered. And it's nice to hear that something that we're doing is resonating with people. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. It's that's wonderful to hear, and it's hard work. Doing the work that we all do, but I think we do it because we love it. So
yeah,
you do. You both. It shows in what you do, and it's not. We were talking before we started the recording, and Kelly was just mentioning how she likes to keep up with all of the change makers on social media, and it sometimes it could be overwhelming. Like today. I mean, it's a perfect example. Today, Jason put out a post where he kind of spread all the books that he's published in less than 2 years. And
his publishing is unbelievable. I sometimes I'm like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah. Well, Jason has a team of people that helps him, and he has a recipe, and he's scrummed the whole process. So he gets it goes through a whole framework. I got to be with him on his first book, and then I'm a guest contributor on Lean Tact, which is like my favorite. The tact lean, of course, it's like a scrum chapter, but it just goes to show like the right process will deliver exactly the right type of results you want.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because if we happen to touch on this at some point in our conversation, there are so many resources out there at our fingertips for people to learn from, and it's just up to everyone to go out and consume them and learn from them and be curious, because there's so much out there that can help people and inspire people in like less than 5 minutes, if you just kind of go out and see. So Melissa, all we need to do, I'm hearing from this, is get Scrum certified and grow our double our team,
Scrum certified, double our team, better plan out our social media posts, get more prolific in our reading, which are all things I am totally down with. So.
Oh yeah, I think the three of us have that in common. We're addicted to learning.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I knew we were all kindred spirits, and this was this was worth the wait to have you all come on the show. So I appreciate you so much. I'm going to kick off the show right now, and we're going to dive right in. You have no idea what's coming your way. Everybody buckle up. This is going to be a show you're going to watch over and over again.
Oh boy.
I'm personally going to rewatch this at least 100 times, because some of my most favorite topics are coming out in the show.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute.
LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show.
Welcome to the show, Kelly Meade and Melissa McEwen. First of all, Melissa, did I pronounce your last name correct?
You nailed it.
Oh, first time.
So there's another way to pronounce that. But I would like to hear how you would.
You'd be surprised what comes through my mind.
Oh, yeah. People say like McEwen, because there's so many different spellings of it.
Yeah.
So both of you are working at Haley Aldrich, a company I have a ton of respect for. And I've met many people that have had their lives transformed by what you're doing. And if people are listening to this and you're thinking, how can a company transform people's lives? I've had grown men and women with tears in their eyes, telling me about the impact that the two of you and your greater team has made on them. So I am
Mm.
beyond humbled to have you both on the show to share. Let's dive right into our favorite topics,
All
lean
right.
design and construction. So people, for an expanded description of who these amazing individuals are, click on the description below. So thank you for that. Kelly, we're going to start with you first. As a lean master black belt and a lean journey program manager, first of all, you don't give me the typical lean black belt type of Spidey clipboard, like you're going to punish me type of vibe, which I super appreciate. Some of my industrial engineers give me that vibe, and it's well deserved. So you don't have that. I like that. But I want to ask you, what inspired you to dedicate your career to promoting lean in design and construction?
So I would say it was two things. I joined Haley Aldrich at the same time that we hired a lean sensei, Steve McIntyre. So this was 2005. And I had never heard of lean. I mean, I'd heard of lean a little bit, like in business school, in operations class, supply chain management, something. But it had absolutely no relevance to my life. So, I just I developed this relationship with our lean sensei and saw what he was trying to do, which was bringing his approach to our company, because we were seeking to do better, to deliver more value in a rapidly changing industry where some of our services were kind of, commoditized. We were experiencing, we would deliver on our projects, but sometimes with heroics. And so, that leads to an inconsistent client experience and an inconsistent staff experience. So started working on that, in 2005. And I was just really inspired and I learned. And the more I started working at HC, and I'm not an engineer or scientist, I kind of come from business and, background. I was just really struck by how much need there is to work a different way. So, you go where the need is. So people, once they started kind of trying new things and experimenting and saying, isn't there a better way? And then using their own ideas and testing their own ideas to actually get better results. That's when I was hooked, because I saw the power of people using their own ideas with some coaching and some resources, by others to change the way they were doing something and seeing a better result. And then they were hooked. So that's really what got me into lean design and construction. Let's apply these principles to where we're working and where people have the need.
I love that story, Kelly, and it touches on a couple of things for me personally as well. And I'm a little jealous that you got started before I did. So you have a 4-year head start on me. I'm a fast learner, Kelly. I'm an open sponge, ready to just take it all in. Right, as you can see, you were skeptical at first. I had a similar reaction too when I was first hearing about this from a team. I resisted it as well. And the thing for me that made me even just open up a little bit was that I saw that the people sharing what they were doing were generally happy people. And at the time, I was not happy.
Wow.
So it made a big difference for me. Now I want to now coming to you, Melissa, with a different question. Melissa, you've had a focus on industrialized construction, which is like a buzzword, nowadays.
Totally.
I can't get into anything and not see it. And you have an additional focus too on the secret sauce for what makes high performing teams, which I really love. I would definitely want to unpack that a lot. But can you explain for the people listening to the show that might not have done the reading and know, what does industrialized construction mean, or industrialized construction manufacturing mean? Why is it important for people in design and construction today?
I think, it was interesting. I didn't intend to land in this place where now we're focusing on industrialized construction, but like Kelly, on my lean journey for about 20 years, similar. It's like for me, it was just, I discovered it by accident. It was the best problem-solving method I'd uncovered, a way to bring people together to solve problems. And so I'm going to bring this back to industrialized construction, I promise. So like, as I sort of saw where that industry was headed, and some of these big, big challenges we have, I think to me, industrialized construction is actually the application of lean in a holistic way to the construction industry for the first time. That's my personal view of it. I think if you talk to others about it, you'll hear that it is the application of manufacturing methods and a mindset to how we build, whether on site or off site. Industrialized construction does not equal prefab, though prefab is an element of industrialized construction. It is the application of systems thinking to our supply chain. It is the application of strong design and construction principles coming together to transform how we build. It embodies so much, but to me, it actually really just is about bringing a lean, whole systems operational mindset to construction. I do think industrialized construction, the term will go away. It's just going to become operationally excellent construction. It's learning from what other industries before us have done to bring these more industrial principles, how they work with the supply chain, how they manage things, how they make things, how they do product development to construction.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And you're sparking on something about vocabulary and what's in vogue right now. And
Oh,
everyone who plays in this space and has jobs like we do, we've run around with these labels, and I've heard from folks like at Mark III specifically. I've had Dan and Michaela on the show, and Dan was like, his trigger word is prefab. So for people listening to the show, I'll put a link down to that show. If you want to make Dan upset, I'm just going to give you the make him angry button. Just tell him he does great prefab, and he will fly off the handle. So I think that, Melissa, you're tapping into some things about reaching deeper into the supply chain. When I was first starting out as a young, fresh out of school electrical engineer that didn't know anything about construction, the people that I was working for at the time were all like 30 plus year people. They were like 10 years of runway before they went to retire. And they taught me things about reaching into the supply chain, effectively communicating in, that kind of vanished after a couple of projects. When those people left the industry, it's almost like we forgot how to talk to the people we buy our stuff from.
I think that's really insightful. And it makes me it's heartening to know that you had that experience early in your career, because I think we I don't know how it happened. It must have happened early in all of our careers, right? But we went into our silos. Things, I think, became adversarial. Maybe it's contracts and risk management and things like that, right? They start to elevate, and you sort of start to, I don't know, dehumanize in some ways the work we do. And vocabulary, right? What we call people. Are they supply partners? Are they trade partners? Are they suppliers? Are they vendors? Are they true partners in project delivery? And so I think vocabulary matters so much in so many ways to what we're doing. You did trigger a nerve with me with that vocabulary matters. So I'm with you, Dan, on that.
On the prefab. How about you, Kelly?
It made me think of the Toyota principle of engage your people and partners in the improvement. So this is not a singular act, changing how you're going to do things, trying things out. You do it with people, and, construction's not special. If all these other industries have figured out how to work with people more effectively, we can too. This is a people business. So when we talk about, I think high performing teams is also a buzzword. We have to use it, and it's a way in, I guess, because people say, well, of course I want to be a high performing team. And you kind of help them point out, well, where are you experiencing problems? And they realize, oh, maybe we're not where we could be. We're not at our potential. And so, we could use this phrase to say, but you could be here. Let's map out a way to get there together. But really, it just comes down to finding out what each of us can bring to the work, whatever industry you're in, making sure there's, a path forward, and that you have two things: the initiative to do something different and the means and methods or resources that are made available. And I think that's why we're at this maybe tipping point, or hopefully at a tipping point, where Melissa and I were talking earlier about this. Like, what's the big hurdle right now? Why isn't everyone adopting industrialized construction and, high performing teams, et cetera? And we were talking about the fact that, sure, we had the innovators and the early adopters. So if you look at like the diffusion of innovation, like what critical mass you need to really pervade the industry and make a change, you have to jump over this chasm. So it's not enough to have the early adopters. You have to jump over to get the, more of a mainstream. And, people have been kind of stuck thinking, I can't change, or we don't have the tools, or whatever. Not construction. We're special. And, I think we're starting to see that we have the means and methods. We have tools and approaches. We have the digital twin. We have all this technology that we're not necessarily taking advantage of, but could. And we're starting to get acknowledgement. Oh, this is all about people. And if we tackle behaviors and get the right behaviors to make this shift, we can make that leap over together. So we're excited to get over that chasm.
I think Kelly and I talk about this a lot. We think, I've never been more excited about the future of construction. And I know not everybody feels that way. People feel the pressure of the labor shortage and the supply chain, and everything's changing so much, and the technology, and it's overwhelming, and we have all these disconnected digital tools, and all those things I hear and I feel them. And yet I've never felt more optimistic in my gut that we're actually really finally on a path of transformative change. And that's not a very data-driven statement I just gave you. I can't give you 1,000 examples of my proof, but I really truly feel that way. And I think it's part of what keeps me so engaged in the work that we're doing, because I'm like, it is happening. I just know we're on the right path finally.
In the human part, the touch, people that come and go. In a lot of construction companies, the attrition rates or the turnover rates can be way higher than 25%. And especially in general contractors, medium-sized companies, it's not uncommon for 50% turnover. And on projects that are challenged, like that we work in as internal and external consultants, those numbers can be even higher. Earlier in my career, I was on a job where we had over 80% attrition on a project where it's the project created the conditions where people had to leave to survive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. And Melissa, I don't know if I'm just brain damaged, but I stayed.
I know, me too.
Right. But I am 100% with you. I feel optimism and hope that I didn't have 6 years ago. And Kelly, you said it before too. There is so much information. When I first started looking at lean things, there was nothing for construction outside of like a few white papers published on some like super obscure websites that nobody besides me and the person that wrote it and their mother and brother has read it.
A little academic.
A little academic. But now there's just like an avalanche, and there are construction podcasts focused on this type of people thing. We have like people talking about vulnerability live on LinkedIn events in the construction industry that has never happened before.
And I can't fathom that this kind of thing isn't what's going to help us attract the next generation to our industry. We are like reframing the perspective that others out there have, I hope, about what construction is. We have a diversity problem for sure. We have so many, but we're talking about these things. People are acting on them. You're hearing stories about tech. You're hearing stories about diversity. You're talking about how people are collaborating. People are openly talking about, the mental health crisis in construction. And I think if we're talking about them and acting on them and trying to change them, it's the kind of thing that's going to attract a whole diverse set of people to our industry, a variety of skill sets. I do think you kind of uncovered maybe what's giving me the hope, Felipe, is some of that stuff that's happening.
That I think you're really hitting on something, Orford. The couple of things that can really attract more people, which we really need, as we know, like there's this talent crisis, and it's not for lack of talent. It's that, people have this perception of what construction is. So two things that can be so attractive are, wow, there's a lot of innovation and technology in construction, design and construction. So, we got to talk about that and keep talking about it. And this is a place where you can form really productive connections with other people. And at a very basic level, that's what we all need. There's data on that. What engages people and what drives people to do their best and be happy. You were talking about happiness, Felipe, is the ability to connect with others. And when we're not able to do that, and when we're working within our silos and we're not able to share information that we need, we're not connected, and that doesn't feel good. So, to the extent that we can be talking about those things, using very real examples, practical, real life results like that are showing people, oh, here's all the great things that we're doing in technology, and here's how we're connecting. If we keep showcasing the good, then maybe we can create more of this positive cycle, reinforcing cycle that we're on. I'm also very optimistic.
I am too. And I even listened back to my season 1 of my podcast. I had Stephanie Roldan on, and we talked about this with a couple of different guests. And she was saying, we weren't, and I'm included, I'm in the we, encouraging our kids to pursue a career in construction. And she had a daughter who was actually very interested. And it was her daughter's liking of what her work was that was like, she was almost fighting her daughter not to want to do it. And then she's realizing, what am I doing? And then it made me realize, and I talked about it with my wife and son afterwards, like, have I ever encouraged you to think about construction? And my son's like, never. He's like, you never encouraged me. So that was 4 years ago. So fast forward this summer, or still it's spring, this spring, when you travel as much as I do, you forget what season actually is.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
right. So earlier this spring, my son said, I would like to come to work in construction and do a job like you do. It's like, what do I have to do? And so we started talking about, construction management or engineering, and we're still having the dialogue, but he's in. And he even said he was having a tough day in school. Some time ago, they had like a lot of tests and stuff, and kids don't like being tested, just like adults. Right. And he said, I watched on his own, he watched a live stream that I did. And he's like, you got me so excited, and I'm glad that I'm coming into construction.
Wow.
And I thought, that is insane. I was like, that was the whole purpose of why I do all these podcasts. Just to get you. So but I want to ask you both, both of you who worked in a variety of professions, and you had different roles, and you both come at this from different places. And I think people listening will be obvious, like, what's bringing the three people like us together. But in your experiences, what's been the most significant challenge that you see construction people facing now, specifically when they're reaching for lean or industrialized principles?
We were talking about this a little bit before. We have a couple of ideas. What's so challenging? So one of the things, and Mr. Melissa will chime in.
it.
One of the big challenges we see is, you can see it that we had the innovators and the early adopters, right? And jump on the lean bandwagon, and let's do value stream mapping. Let's do pull planning. Let's create a IPD contract. And these are all technical fixes. These are things that you do that, yes, might make a difference, might change the conversation, but they're not enough. And when we say technical, we mean when you know what the problem is, and you know the solution, and you can pretty much act independently and say, okay, I need A to fit with B, put A and B together, done. But a lot of what we're seeing in this industry is collaborative or adaptive challenges where you actually don't know what the problem is, which requires team learning to find out what the problem is we're trying to solve in the first place. And it requires people to work together in a team to also figure out the solution. So you can think about, we have so much time pressure, the schedule, meet the cost, and we don't thank you, Jason Schroeder, Kevin Rice, for, I had a huge aha. We don't allow for buffer. We don't build in buffer for figuring out what the problem is in the first place and then collaboratively figuring out the solution together. We don't allow time and space or means and methods for that, although those exist, but it's continuing to talk about doing things a different way. That's what I see as, we see as one of the big hurdles is like treating something like, oh, we just do this, I'll stay on schedule versus, oh, we need to step back and take a different approach here. And that's going to require, maybe some time and some different approaches.
I also think one of the challenges Kelly and I talked about is that we all are so tied to our identities and what makes us who we are. Like, I'm an engineer, I'm an electrician, I'm a plumber, I'm an architect. And I think sort of where we're headed and trying to truly for the first time, maybe transform our means and methods for the first time in a long, long time, how we create this critical infrastructure out there. Roles are blurring and people's identities are blurring. And that's really, really hard just to cope with. And so we see that a lot on jobs that people are they're in their mindset of their role, even on the most collaborative jobs. A wonderfully set up IPD job, your identity and your role, it's so ingrained in the history of your company, I think, and it just is out there. And so that's one of the challenges we see even with people on the early end of the adoption of innovation curve, the change agents, the people trying to work differently, what it means to, and I didn't want to say build, but I'm going to say build, what it means to build the things that we're building right now, design them, create them. The roles are blurring, and I think they're going to look very different in a decade. And I just think that's a really hard change to go through. We don't actually have answers about how to solve it, but we definitely try to facilitate seeing of it. Go see, ask why, go understand what's happening in a different place in the system, because you're not working just on your thing in your lane and your role anymore.
And then engaging people to own the creation of the roles and behaviors that will work for them in the project. We help implement what we create. So,
like electrician is a great example, right? Like the electrical contractors do a lot of design, but they don't think of themselves as designers at all, right? And a common challenge we encounter when we're working with like an electrical contracting company might be, right, how they start to approach design, because they're doing prefab and they're thinking about the field install and all the coordination, but they're putting design professionals or technology professionals or VDC experts into those roles. And then they're leaving the quote unquote builder electricians, the foremen, the folks in the fab shop downstream. But those folks are designers. They're designing it as it's being built. So that's just a little example, I think, of even how people progressing on this path. It's really hard to get them to think of themselves that way. But when we ask that question, they're like, oh, you're right. I do design. I design every day on the fly. And like, right. So let's move that expertise further up in the system. So
helping those, people who thought of them as I'm the designer or I'm the engineer, not have an identity crisis because other people down the chain are also contributing to the function design. Doesn't mean that you're not valuable. It means you have another role to play in collaborating with said contractor on the design.
Kelly, you just
Good
reminded
thing.
me. I was in a collaborative meeting one time, and this was a new team to design build. So not even super high collaboration, but it's getting there, right? And the architect in several meetings said, "I'm the architect," with even more indignation than I can conjure up right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody, after like the second or third time that it happened, it would be always followed by a tirade of why basically the rest of us were idiots. And thank God this person was there. I responded the third time and I said, "I'm but a simple, sometimes stupid general contractor." I said, "Thank you for being here and reminding us what your title is because we forgot." And after that,
Oh,
it never happened again. He never said that again. And another time in my career, a project director took me to the side and said, we're going to put you on Saturdays, not only because you're the new person, but because it's the only day where you'll actually have breathing room. And we want you to take our foreman, our labor foreman, to breakfast. And you're going to pay for breakfast." He's like, "You're going to pay and then we'll let you expense it." But don't tell the labor foreman you're expensing it. We want him to think that you're buying him breakfast because
mhm.
you're doing the right thing. And they said, "Just talk to him." That's what the director said. "Just talk to him. This is part of your learning, your education." And we would go to this little breakfast place in Chicago. It was this little diner. It was incredible. Like the things that we would talk about, what I learned from his 40 years of being a labor foreman or working directly in this building. We were on this, I don't even know like how many projects he'd had it by this point. I never had that again in my career.
Mm,
Right. There are
yeah.
different times where I got to shadow people, but nothing like that where we're off the job, getting paid to be on the job. We're learning, so it counts. This was for $1 billion company. I don't know how, common this was. So people listening to the show, I mean, you tell me if anything like this is still happening. I've not seen this again in a long time.
And why would it even you got my brain going that, like, even where it is happening for onboarding or mentoring sort of more junior folks coming in through a company, well, what a shame that is. I would benefit from that. Everyone would benefit from that at every stage in their career. And I think it's something that maybe we've mentally applied just to, it's what we need to do to get you ready to then go off and be independent and self-sufficient.
Mhm.
And that's that.
You said something there. You said you had so much learning.
Yeah.
And we don't intentionally design in time to learn from each other
Right.
or venues or opportunities to learn from each other. And I think that's the big gap is we're not doing enough learning. We're doing a lot of doing.
Yep.
And
Sure.
we're showing up expected to
Yep.
be experts, or we think we're expected to be experts. And so we're going to act like experts.
The
And
director told me, Kelly, he's like, you had had a BS in electrical engineering. He said, "That's pretty much worthless on this type of job." Now there was a significant mechanical and MEP punch list that I did for like 2 years and got some really strong neck muscles doing overhead punch. I learned a lot about how to find defects that I still to this day, I can't just walk into a building and not find all the problems in 3 seconds. But he said, he's like, "I've got to like have you unlearn the nonsense that you learned in school
yeah,
and have you learn from people who are experienced because you've all been theory and books and maybe your circuits class was good for you. We'll find out when we talk to the electrician if he really learned anything or not." And we just recognizing like he even knew like what I studied, right? I've gone to projects today where you ask people like, "How do you know each other? Like, how do you know that project manager has the capability to negotiate these change orders?" And people are like, "Well, the title is PM, right? Or her title is project manager. Like, they should just know." And I was like, "How do you know they know?"
Mm.
I ask those annoying questions that I'm sure the two of you also get into.
yeah,
You've
and I
both
think
been accused of being annoying for sure and intensely curious.
yeah, and it reminds me that we assume that the more seasoned or senior you are in a job, the less mentoring and learning you need to do, which is a bunch of you know what?
You could say
and it's
bullshit,
actually
Kelly.
more
Kelly, this is a construction show. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Say it.
This is-
bunch of crap. I was just going to say crap.
okay, Kelly said crap.
Um,
I said bullshit for the record.
And it's just the opposite. You look at in baseball, where, you get more advanced and you actually have, special coach. You have the pitching coach, you have the first base coach. And it's like the more professional you get, you have all these resources and coaching and mentoring to do your best. And what do we do in our industry? We leave you alone. Well, you must be fine. You're seasoned. You've done this before, or you're old, or whatever. And it's just the opposite. So I think we need to be okay with saying, hey, I need help, or offering, just making it okay to have those learning opportunities from each other, especially with some experience, because then you can learn from each other.
I knew a person earlier in my career was an executive working for a large general contractor. And this individual actually came into a scenario where they were not sure what to do. And they asked for help in a meeting, which was seemed like an appropriate thing. And upper management's perspective was like, well, what did we hire you for if we have to tell you? I mean, clearly they didn't know what to do either. And instead of talking about it openly, they ran that person off the company. And when that person left, it shut down the entire business unit that they were in, because it turns out that they knew and had the contacts, the relationships, and the clients. And within a year of them leaving, all of that work evaporated for that company.
Wow.
And I don't think that they ever looked back and took ownership of what they did by just not helping somebody, because they themselves couldn't say, I don't know. And so for people listening, it's okay to say, I don't know. Now I'm going to go back to Kelly with a very hard question. Kelly, you've emphasized the importance of operationalizing behavioral change, specifically for lean in designing construction. So I would love if you can give some examples of doing this and how it's improved results on the project, KPIs that people know and love, like time and money,
Sure. So,
or happiness for extra credit.
or happiness. Well, I can hit all those with one example, which is meetings. So people hate meetings, and we have too many meetings. There's not one project that I'm working on or assisting with where meetings aren't a problem. And it's not that, you could just solve meetings, but there's so many things that are around it that create a bad meeting. So to operationalize, behaviors in a meeting, you can still go back to lean principles and say, okay, well, what is the purpose? What is purpose? What is the purpose of the meeting? Translate. What is value? Who are the customers of this meeting? What do they need to get out of it? How many times do we actually ask, what do people need to get out of this meeting? This hour of my precious time? 0, right? So if we think about that fundamental lean principle of understand who your customers are and what they value, what they need, that is step number 1 of operationalizing a behavior. Then seeking to form an agenda or a better format or venue to have that meeting that will deliver those results. So, if half the meeting is spent on, for example, updating people on things that they could probably go in and find in, something in Procore or something that's hanging up in the big room, well, that's 30 minutes of waste that we can actually just cut out of the meeting. So that's operationalizing behaviors by reducing waste. And then another example is, how do we talk to each other and how do we handle conflict in the meeting? So for example, you could have, 1 or 2 people that are constantly dominating the conversation and driving their agenda. And you never have, the input of maybe different personality types who are a little more introverted, but they really have important information to share. If you would just shut up and let them talk or ask them. So being mindful and conscious of, oh, wow, we shouldn't have the same person or 1 or 2 people talking. They are taking up all of the potential and we're missing a lot. So we use a phrase a lot called step back or step up. So if you've been talking a lot, step back and allow for someone else to step up. So that's another example of operationalizing a behavior, which is respect. Give people the respect. You brought them to the damn meeting. Well, let them contribute. So, and it's just being, putting a mirror up into our behavior, to ourselves and saying, how can I operationalize this behavior? I could literally do things differently. I could say things differently. So that's just one example of that.
Kelly, one thing I've seen you do so well that I do admire is you also just putting a term on it and calling it that. And we need to operationalize, make visible, document whatever this behavior that's required. That's a part of it, and it's something that I think you do so well is making it visible to people that we need to do this. And this is something I think as a team and a practice, this is where we're constantly learning, and we would love to know what you've seen work, Felipe, because this is hard. Like these behaviors don't stick. Like putting the systems in place is step one, but then you just have to keep at it and at it and at it. And we're constantly looking for other ways to operationalize behaviors like that. We're on a learning journey up on this one ourselves, for sure.
And you just reminded me, I didn't answer the second part of your question, which was the KPIs, but it's related to what you just said, Melissa, which is to make visible. So let's just take the meeting example a little further. So what if we made visible the types of behaviors that we need to have, with conditions of success we need to have in our meetings, and we made them visible, wherever, it's our virtual big room, or it's in the big room, or it's, posted up in front of us every day. And what if we were to, if these are the things that are important, obviously there's the lagging outcomes that we care about, like, let's say schedule is one of them. You could actually tie better meeting performance to probably a contribution to the schedule. You're not sucking up as much people's time, and you're getting the right information in the meeting so that people can make the right decisions, which also can keep you on schedule. And oh, by the way, that could have a contribution to cost, keeping costs below, a target. So you can also develop leading KPIs. Like I'm very interested in leading behavioral indicators or metrics. So if, you're starting to track, wow, did we have 100% of the people show up? Did they feel like they were able to contribute something to the meeting? Did they get value out of it? And that's just a simple question. How much of the meeting was value added versus non-value added? You just ask those questions once a week. You can track that. And it doesn't need to be exact, but you can be directionally correct. I'm a big believer in directionally correct KPIs.
Oh my God, we have so much in common. As the more of the two of you talk, I'm just like, I feel like I'm in, if there could be a lean Disneyland where everybody's happy, I'm there. I'm there.
God,
Kelly.
if there could be a lean Disneyland.
If there could be one.
Down, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm there. So that'll be a quote for sure.
We'll have
Kelly.
a big party there.
Yeah.
We'll invite all our friends.
At some of the stuff you mentioned, because you asked, you said, are there things? So I've done some more research in Cynefin, which is spelled CNECYNEFIN, Cynefin. It's a Welsh word. The research that's been done is by Dave Snowden, not the whistleblower.
I was like, wait a minute.
Dave Snowden used to work at IBM, and he's created this complexity theory. It's been a collaboration with a lot of other people, but he's like the predominant voice in complexity theory. I got turned on to him because I was watching a keynote, and it was an agile conference, and he said of all the frameworks out there for project management, the only one he respects is Scrum. And I was like, I have that Scrum label in case people watching the show don't know, how was I going to work Scrum into the conversation? Whatever minute this is how I did it. Right. This is how I did it. But Dave says that in complexity theory, we can operate in different areas, and you as a system, and he criticizes systems thinking heavily and says that like there's some areas where it just falls short. And he's very specific with his critiques. I mean, he is epic. Like you definitely gotta check his stuff out. And his book is read. But anyway, where I'm going with this, he says that depending on what domain you're in, You could
Mhm.
have some enabling conditions, enabling boundary conditions, enabling constraints. So, Kelly, when you're asking those questions, you're creating space for people to reflect where they otherwise wouldn't. And then just knowing where we are changes your trajectory. So, if I can, it's like when we drive, we see the
Mhm.
painted lines to the left and the right. Your brain
Mhm.
will automatically make your hands move to keep your car in the center.
Mm.
Nobody
Stay
actively
there.
burns calories to stay in the middle, right?
Stay in your lane. Yeah.
Stay in your lane. And the questions you're asking tell people, like, are we getting more value? Or are we headed towards a worse meeting?
Yeah.
And you're going to naturally turn the wheel so that you can go the other way.
That's right. You'll intervene. You'll make an adjustment. And the more that's exactly right. And so the more that the team is aware, oh, it's actually important that we we're contributing value or we're actually problem solving. And if you have this indicator telling you, oh, you're getting off track. And if the team gives each other permission to and hold each other accountable to getting back on track and intervening, then you're golden.
Right. And
Then someone will step up.
sometimes, Kelly, like as much as I love Scrum, I don't always suggest, I almost never suggest it to teams. I let them pull for it instead. This is why I try to post on Scrum every day so that there's just more pull. But
Mhm.
I work with the team, and I knew that the team was in trouble, and I couldn't make suggestions to them because they felt like they were already overwhelmed and they could do nothing
Oh,
else. And so I used that same approach like you did with meetings to make it a little bit better and use it as my excuse for intervention, because their
Mm.
meetings were terrible. They sucked. It was like god awful. It was I that we could do a whole show on how terrible meetings are.
a
And
hundred
but now
percent. Yep.
but now coming back to you, Melissa, now it's your turn. Hot seat. So
Okay.
Melissa, you super nerd, which I love. I consider myself a super
Oh,
nerd as well.
thanks.
Right. And I knew you would appreciate that compliment.
I do.
You co-created the industrialized construction assessment, the maturity assessment, which almost makes me suspect, if I check your background, you might be an industrial engineer. What kind of engineer are you?
So I'm not. That's amazing. I don't know if it's amazing. I'm a geologist by original training, which is obviously the most obvious path to where I am now. And then I did, of course, and I studied environmental engineering, and then I just sort of
Okay.
ended up in this industry, and then discovered that I loved it. So yeah,
Okay.
no,
That's perfect.
not
That's good. I mean, I know what you're reading for fun based on
yeah.
that. So you created the industrialized construction maturity assessment. What my question is, like, how does this tool help organizations better understand the transition to industrialized construction, no matter what their starting point is?
So it's really, really, really simple. It just helps them see, like we have to know where we are. Right, using the road example, we have to know whether we're on the right side of the road or the wrong side of the road. And so we kind of came into this really honestly that we were seeing people working really hard and doing amazing things to try to change how they were doing all things construction, approaching prefab, trying to establish a product strategy. But what we realized is we are kind of an insular industry. We don't necessarily go learn and see from others as much as we could. At least I feel that way. Like I encourage people to go to other places and learn. And so we realized people didn't know what good looked like. So they were just on this path. So the first thing it does is it just helps you. So there are 7 disciplines. It looks across. It's a very holistic look. It's not just about prefab and bringing manufacturing methods to how you do prefab. It considers how we design. It looks at how our management systems might be helping us move up the curve or actually holding us back. It looks at cultural enablers that might make you ready to embrace change, to experiment, to invest in learning. And so it looks across the spectrum so that you can see what you're already good at that maybe you could capitalize on to help you move up the curve. It identifies areas of gaps against really specific criteria. So we also didn't make this up. We went and looked for the best things out there we knew. Manufacturing has levels of maturity. The Shingo model was a huge inspiration to us. And so we pulled from these things and said, can we put them in a language that will be meaningful to this industry and this moment that we're in? So it helps you see where you are. It helps you know what good looks like so that you can then decide where to invest. Oh, this thing I was about to invest in isn't actually the most important thing to invest in. I should shift my investment over here. And then it helps people imagine the results or know what the measurable results they might be able to get by moving from level 2 maturity in, how you're doing materials management or how you're setting up your warehouse to level 4 maturity. Because these things sound great. These ideas that we bring forward sound great. And what people want to know is, what the heck is that going to do for me? Like, that sounds great. This Kanban thing you're talking about is amazing, but what is it actually going to do for me? So it lays that out specifically. And then the last thing it does is, because we're learning people, we've identified things that people could just learn about so they could act on this themselves, and we'll steer them to resources all around the industry for learning.
Oh, that's fantastic. I just got chills for this episode's blog post that we're going to have, or we're going to have a link to Melissa's Industrialized Construction Maturity Assessment so that people can get into that thing and see how immature we are.
It's the
And that's so
feature ride
exciting.
at Disney.
Yes, it's a feature ride, Kelly. You're right.
It's at the Lean Disneyland. It's the ICMA ride. You will want to go on it.
Haven't you both had transformative moments in your career? It's this aha where you're like, oh, everything I thought was wrong, or I didn't know anything about this, right? I thought I was good at this, but then when I did my 360 feedback, it was like, oh gosh, I have so much to learn and work on. Like, I yearn for those things, and that's all we're trying to do is help others be able to see those things. So
I just did a 360 feedback and I had blind spots. It was cool to have a coach like point some things out to me that it made no sense. And it wasn't surprises from like my supervisor and one of my mentors. The surprises came from my peers. And that was like super unexpected out of left field because I do a lot of reflection. So it's like, it's for everybody. I'm immature as well. Be the first one to say. So I can't wait to get on that ride, Kelly.
We're all immature.
But now I want to ask you both, as you work to create high performing teams, and I think that we've seen enough low performing teams or average or mediocre teams. What are some of the key attributes and behaviors that each of you has found contributes to the success, a shared success, when people come together?
I know, because Kelly and I talk about this all the time. Our shared number one is curiosity. Be curious. Curious about others, about what's going on, about what's happening outside the sphere that you can see wherever you're working. That just innate curiosity, I think, is maybe the defining, for me, the most important feature of a high performing team. A highly curious team is going to learn fast. They're going to work together differently. They're going to see. So that one, I know we share, Kelly, as critical.
Absolutely. I mean, it's because it's directly related to the ability to learn and the desire to learn. So, we've just been talking about learning. And so if you're not curious, you're not going to want to learn. If you don't learn, your team won't learn. And if your team doesn't learn and act together based on that learning, you're going to make all the wrong actions. So that's really key. And then there's other things that are, I guess, well, one is another intangible, but it's a big one. And it goes back to our earlier conversation, and it's kind of being willing to look at your own role and your own identity and being open to that evolving. Someone on our team said years ago, well, I think we should all be working on, versions of ourselves. And he said, like, I'm probably on version 4.0 at least. And I thought, that is a really great way to think. You're not changing your core soul. You're just out with a better version every year based on what you've been learning and how you're adapting to your environment. So anyway, that willingness to, what's the next version of myself that would be great? So, and then there's the more maybe accessible or tangible things that, to look for high performing teams. Melissa talked to some of them, like the right management structure, right roles, the right structure, the right rewards, system of, maybe incentives and rewards and recognition, certainly the people skills, having the right skills and collaborative ability, the ability to have productive conflict is very important. And then, the having the means and methods to support the new behavior as well can be helpful. That's kind of like a structural thing you can add on, which isn't rocket science. But yeah, I think that the curiosity and the willingness to learn and adapt yourself.
You actually reminded me though, Kelly, like we think of this like, these project teams are big and complex and they run for many, many years. And they're nothing different than a small company at some level or a small startup. And yet the difference is, but they're people from all different companies that are bringing their own cultures and their own systems and their own tools together. And so we try to bring best practices from true like organizational behavior to high performing teams. Like you are intentional with how you set up a company, the systems you put in place, the rewards, the metrics, the things Kelly said jogged my mind. And so that sort of intentionality and recognition for us is like an early indicator of a high performing team. And we're not talking about, we took this step to do a project charter. Okay, good. It goes beyond that, right? It really is recognizing that you are setting up a company, an organization, and you have to build it intentionally from the start, not just start doing.
I'm just pausing because there's so much momentum to just do and not think first or recognize what we've designed. And we're definitely on the rides now. We're on the ride. So I want to ask you both if you could each share, one success story from your specialty, your favorite flavor at this theme park of this lean amazingness, where you saw a significant improvement that made a difference to at least one individual, if not the entire project.
Well, I had one that stands out, and it was really formative for me. It was kind of like an Uber project, but we worked with an organization that, an institution that was looking at its current condition, and it had just a ton of, it was trying to manage its facilities. It was trying to improve the overall condition of, they had done a facility condition assessment, and it wasn't good. And, when you looked at, well, it's not just about renovating buildings or buying new buildings or, increasing our capital budget. It was about stepping back and looking at how are we maintaining these on a daily basis, and who are the people who are expected to maintain it. So it was looking at the fact that 75% or 80% of their maintenance was like emergency or corrective maintenance. And they needed to flip that ratio, right? And we used a lean approach, and we brought everyone together who was contributing to the design, the construction, and the operation and maintenance of the buildings. And the more that we understood the things that were getting in their way, and gave them venues to talk about, before, replacing this, I have to get this permission slip signed by my supervisor. And now that might take a couple of days. And then, if we don't have it in stock, I have to go out to Home Depot and, do it. And they were just like, literally, we identified thousands of hours in wasted time. And you can just translate that into wasted talent right there. Right. So it's people in the organization wasting thousands of hours because of, processes, structures that they were set up in. So you can take the best performing person. If they're in a bad process or structure, they're not going to perform well. So just by identifying those sources, the greatest waste is the waste you do not see, making it visible and this is obviously a team effort and, multi-pronged approach, but over the course of 7 years, they completely reversed that ratio and they had more money to invest in their buildings. They were spending less time on emergency and corrective maintenance. They added positions that needed to be added. They improved the flow of information so people could make the right decisions every day. They pushed the work down to the lowest level possible so that you're not waiting for the tops to make decisions, but you're empowering the people closer to the work to maintain and fix, things the way they saw it. So that was like a huge success on many levels. And I think the best thing about that is that those people also approached other projects and other things they're working on in their career differently. So I think that's really important, is not just like, oh, great, we changed the KPIs and, went from A to B. Like, that's great on a project. But as a consultant, I want to contribute to someone's ability to sustain their performance and take that new way of thinking to the next project and the next project that we're not even a part of. That stands out in my mind as a success.
Agreed.
And I know what you're talking about, and I was so proud of them too. Yeah. I'm like, it's funny. That you told us you were going to ask this question, and I still am like, there's just so many little successes, and sometimes I lose sight, I guess, of the impact of the little successes, and I'm trying to compile some grand big success story, but to me, it's all the little successes that are out there, like from working, on the fab shop floor and just being curious myself and asking 100 times, well, why do we do it that way? That's interesting. Why are you doing that way? Why are you doing that way? To them watching that just simple questioning take hold in the shop. The leader of the shop will ask, why are you doing that way? Then the apprentices started to ask, why do we build it this way? And so like a simple success story is just introducing that curiosity, teaching about waste and flow to a pool of electrical pre-apprentices in the fab shop, and just watching them take it in like sponges, right? I've never learned anything like this, and these questions are so good. What is this thing you're doing? And we weren't talking about lean or anything. We were just asking questions, getting them to reconsider why things were done that way. And the outcome success, I mean, for me, it was all the little things we saw, how they changed a work cell, how they reorganized the warehouse, how they had better meetings, that they put up visual boards. But the real impact was when that class of pre-apprentices went out into the field as apprentices, the feedback from the foreman was, where did these kids come from? What have they been doing? This is the best class, or I'm sure I just used the wrong word and everyone listening is horrified, but this is the best group of apprentices we've ever had. And all we did was introduce them to why you would be curious, problem solving, having eyes for waste, going to see and ask why. So that's a big, that one just resonates with me, because the feedback from these salty seasoned veterans was like, wow, they're amazed.
Yeah. So everyone listening to the show, that's Melissa's invitation to you to blow her up in the comments. With what do we call that? I think that's a great stuff. Yeah. No, it's great. We like that. It's good engagement. It's like there's no such thing as bad PR.
I don't know.
I think both of you are hitting on stuff. I had no idea you were going to go in the directions that you went, and that was just
fun,
extra juicy good for me. I think we'd all, if Deming was still alive today, I think we'd probably accidentally meet at a Deming retreat. For sure, we'd all, we'd be all after class with Dr. Deming, because you're hitting on some really great things that are aligned with some of the first principles approaches that he taught. So I love all that. And we're going to switch gears, because I told you there'd be questions you would not be ready for. Maybe you will be. I don't know. Let's see. So in terms of just sustainable construction practices, because it
Mm.
sounds like we're playing the long game with what we're trying to do here. How do each of you see lean systems thinking or industrialized construction reducing the impact of our industry on the world? Because I think last time I checked, nothing pollutes more than buildings.
So many ways. I tell everyone this story, naive me, before I really started on my lean journey back when I was a geologist, I was in one of the early lead cohorts, right? So I got my lead accredited professional, and I truly actually thought we had solved the construction waste problem. Like, what a dummy I am that I believe that. And then I realized, oh no, that physical waste lives in all these other places, right? They're just leaving the site to be thrown away back at the fab shop, and it's all the cutting and the reordering of the materials. It's all the stuff we bring back that just sits there and is wasted. So this is a long way to say, to me, the biggest impact, or the first impact I think that this sort of bringing a manufacturing mindset to construction will have, is actually in eliminating some of this basic physical waste. It is still out there, and with more precise designs and thinking about products and components and using the technology out there to actually order only what we need and put in just-in-time systems, which are easier to do in the fab shop. They're still not easy, but they are easier to do. I think we will make a big dent in physical waste quickly. And then, the other thing that I think is so important, and actually everyone out there listening, are people tracking their scrap rate? Like, this is a really simple thing that we could be tracking and moving the needle on, and people aren't tracking it. And then I think the more impactful change, one of the more impactful changes, that we are going to rethink, I think, our materials, what we build with, how we build, because changing your means and methods opens up opportunity to use different materials. Actually going back to what you experienced and partnering with your suppliers early on to think about it that is really going to accelerate, I think, our pace of innovation. But we still have to be paying attention to it and tracking it and measuring it. And I think the systems that are out there, owners are starting to be asked to think about their scope 1 and 2 emissions, and that is coming our way. And I think that will accelerate this as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kelly? What's the connection to lean? I didn't even go there. I just did IC.
Well, it's the same thing. You just made me think, when you look at your electric bill, more and more bills are showing up where it's like, this is how much energy you used compared to your neighbors. And it's like, oh. And so making it visible is, step number 1. It's setting up some friendly competition, maybe some pressure. Like, there's the carrot and the stick approach. So, the investors or regulators or whoever, or just stakeholders, making it clear that they do care about the impact you're having on the environment and what is the embodied carbon of your building. And then I think, so making it visible. And then you talked, Melissa, several examples about getting upstream, like further upstream. So you're going all the way back to the design process, right? And only designing what's needed. Well, that requires the contractors and people who are going to install it actually also being invited to be upstream and work in that level. It means cost estimators being invited to work upstream with those cross-functional disciplines, talking about what's truly needed. So it's, working in a different phase of the project than you might be normally invited to work in, to have those conversations that can then make an impact. And it goes back to the principle of only deliver what is needed in the amount needed at the time needed in the right form. And that's going to make a huge impact on waste in our environment from construction.
And I think
Definitely.
the tech advancements that are coming, you know, the ability to collect the data, use it and analyze it and make those decisions sooner, see the impacts of those things, like that does matter. So I am appreciative of all. There are carbon calculators coming out there, right? Autodesk is building things into their platforms. Other people have other platforms. Making it visible, making the data visible will allow people to then use it and act and change. We actually added ESG to the IC maturity assessment, literally only for the reason of just getting people to think about it and have it be thought provoking. It's a very small percentage of the questions. It's really low weighting, but it has provoked some fascinating conversations where people are like, what does this have anything to do with what I've asked you to come here for? And then we start to talk through it and they're like, oh, wow, I got to go work on. So, yeah.
Yeah, it all makes a big difference. Yeah, thank you both for those contributions. And, lastly, to put a bow on this, for everyone listening to the podcast, thank you so much for being with us the whole time. If you're listening, that means you're a super fan at our lead Shangri-La theme park here. I want to have each of you give the listeners, what is a good starting point to implement something from lean design and construction or something from industrialized construction on their project or in their organization.
On your project, make it a commitment to go out and talk to someone who is doing something completely different from you in a different discipline on the project team and learn more about what are they doing and how is it going and what's getting in their way. One person outside of your bubble, go talk to them and learn.
I'm not even going to add another one. Like that is the place to start. I just think Kelly and I are so aligned on this. People need to go see, ask why, and learn from one another. Everything else mystical or scary or whatever about lean, put it all out of your head. Just go see and learn what's happening somewhere else in the system.
Amazing. Kelly, Melissa, thank you both so much for coming on the show and going way beyond lean and industrialized construction. These insights for creating high performance, I learned something new that I'm going to carry forward with me for both of you about curiosity. And there's definitely value in talking to people like you because I feel like I'm richer now than I was before we started. If you're watching, go and follow these people because they are 100% some of the best change makers I know. Thank you both so much for being on the show.
Oh,
Thank you, Felipe.
Yes,
Thank you for being a change maker with us. You're coming along for the ride.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC Show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.